What I'd like to do is start by providing you with an overview of the 10 paths. Then, I'd like to introduce you to one more technique, the SPIRE check-in, which is a way of gaining a big picture view of your happiness levels and bringing about change in one or all of the SPIRE elements. Here are the 10 paths that we've been exploring throughout the quest. Under spiritual well-being, we embarked on the path of purpose, which is about finding meaning at home and at work. Do you experience your professional and personal life as a job, as a career, or as a calling? Can you experience more purpose in your day-to-day? Whether the cleaners or the doctors in a hospital, whether engineers or hairdressers, whether teachers or parents, they all have a great deal of control over the way they experience their day-to-day and their life as a whole. The second path under spiritual well-being is that of mindfulness. Can you spend more of your time aware of the fact that you're always here and the time is always now? Whether formally or informally, can you embark on the path of mindfulness and give yourself the gift of the present? Being mindful more of the time, whether through a formal meditation practice or by informally being present to whatever it is that you're doing, yields remarkable benefits to both mind and body. And speaking of mind and body, we have the path of exercise as the first of two physical well-being paths. What form of exercise do you enjoy? What can you do to introduce more movement into your life? We were not born or made to be sedentary. For our physical and mental health, we need to move it. The path of recovery deals with the rising levels of stress and the potentially negative impact of stress. The questions you need to ask yourself are, first, can you see the upside, the benefits of stress? Remember that the way we perceive stress becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And second, do you take sufficient time for recovery? Remember that stress is not the problem. Lack of recovery is the problem. Under intellectual well-being, the I of SPIRE, we have the path of failure, which is about learning and growing from mistakes. Can you fail a little more? Can you embrace and learn from your failures? The most successful people throughout history are those who have failed time and time again. The key to a happier and more successful life is learn to fail or fail to learn. The path of journaling is about deep reflection on the self. How can you bring a little more coherence to your life? Can you tread the path of journaling and open up about your joys and sorrows? Writing about your best and worst experiences for 20 minutes or as little as 2 minutes can yield remarkable psychological and physiological benefits. Me-search is no less important than research. Relational well-being includes, of course, the path of real relationships. Relationships are the #1 predictor of happiness, and 1,000 friends on social media are no substitute for that one best friend. What can you do to increase the quantity of face-to-face interactions in your life? What can you do to improve the quality of your relationships? We often need to disconnect from technology in order to connect to people. The path of giving is the path to goodness and happiness. Can you give to yourself and give to others? What can you do today to spread more goodness and kindness in our world? The Hebrew word for giving, the word natan, captures the win-win nature of generosity and kindness. For when we give, we receive. The final element of SPIRE, emotional well-being, includes the path of acceptance. Can you give yourself the permission to be human? Can you genuinely accept any and all emotions? When we allow the painful emotions to flow through us fully, they go away just as they came. Moreover, when allowing in painful emotions like anxiety, envy, and anger, we open ourselves up to the full range of pleasurable emotions like love, joy, and inspiration. The 10th path, the path of gratitude, is about appreciating rather than taking for granted all that life has to offer. What can you be grateful for right now? Can you appreciate the many gifts that life offers you? When you appreciate the good appreciates. As I mentioned in the very first lecture, looking at these 10 paths may feel overwhelming. You need to keep in mind, therefore, that to increase your happiness levels, you do not need to do it all. Focusing on 1, 2, or 3 of the paths can bring about significant change in your overall well-being. Small changes can make a big difference. The key is to commit to a path and then stay the course. A relatively minor shift in what or how you do things can, if practiced consistently, really shift the happiness needle. And now, I get to the final exercise of this quest, the Spire Check-In. It's an exercise I co-created with my colleagues Megan McDonough and Maria Sirois. What the Spire Check-In does is provide you with an overview of your current state of happiness, which can then help you take the necessary steps to increase your well-being in each or all of the Spire elements. Do you remember my discussion from the first lesson of how pursuing happiness directly is unhelpful and can actually lead to less happiness? Saying to yourself, I want to be happier, or I would like to increase my happiness levels, is unhelpful. What we need to do instead is pursue happiness indirectly, which is why it's so important to introduce the Spire elements and then pursue these through the paths. We need to break happiness down into its elements, just like we would break down sunlight into the colors of the rainbow. The Spire Check-In does just that. It is about assessing parts or the whole of our life in terms of the 5 Spire elements, and then encouraging us to pursue change in each of the elements. In other words, to indirectly pursue happiness. The Spire Check-In is simple and comprises 3 steps: ascribe, describe, and prescribe. Ascribe is about ascribing a score on a scale of 1 to 10 to how you're doing spiritually, physically, intellectually, relationally, and emotionally. Describe is about describing why you gave yourself the score. And the 3rd step, prescribe, is about prescribing how you would like to improve your score or, if you're satisfied, to maintain it. This 3rd step needs to include prescriptions that are as concrete and specific as possible. The prescriptions can be taken directly from one of the 10 paths I introduced in this quest, or they can be entirely different. Whatever you think will work to contribute to the particular Spire element, and therefore indirectly to your overall happiness. You can use this method to evaluate your life on a micro level or a macro level, from a single day to your life as a whole. Here's an example of me evaluating this past week, beginning with ascribing a score on each of the Spire elements. When it comes to spiritual well-being on a scale of 1 to 10, last week gets a 7. Physical well-being over the past week for me is an 8. Intellectual well-being gets a resounding 9. Relational well-being, I'll give it a 7. And when it comes to emotional well-being, it is probably an 8. Overall, as far as I'm concerned, a very good week. However, I can then go beyond the mere numbers and describe what each number actually stands for, and then prescribe a path forward. For physical well-being, I gave myself an 8 because on the positive side, I exercised 3 times and did yoga twice. I ate plenty of fruits and vegetables and got between 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. On the negative side, I sat for hours each day without sufficient movement, which is unhealthy. Also, my wife and I went out with friends and I ate way too much, leaving me feeling heavy and fatigued. When it comes to prescribing, the Spire Check-In can once again lead directly to one of the 10 paths I introduced, or to something which is not associated with one of the 10 paths. To improve on the score, I'm prescribing the following. Continue to exercise and do yoga. Use my smartphone to remind me to get up every 25 minutes and take 20 or so steps at least. And eat until I'm 80% full, rather than stuff myself. Elaborating on relational well-being, I did go out with friends who were visiting us, and that was fun, and my wife and I spent quality time together, which was lovely. However, I did not have nearly enough one-on-one time with my kids. The prescribed part is straightforward. Continue to spend quality time with my wife and add 2 weekly hours one-on-one time with each of the kids. Doing this Spire Check-In exercise once in a while, whether evaluating a week, a day, or a month, can benefit you a great deal as you raise your levels of awareness and live more consciously. What's important in this exercise is not whether you give yourself a 9, which is higher than most people, or a 3, which is lower. What you mean by a particular number is different from what someone else means. The purpose of this exercise is to raise your levels of awareness so that you can bring about positive changes in your life by reinforcing what is working and improving the things that are not. One of the best teachers I've ever had was Professor Brian Little, who taught personality psychology at Harvard. Brian is an outstanding lecturer and a very caring teacher. Often, when meeting a student, he would ask, "How are you, really?" Professor Little really wanted to know how we were doing, as opposed to the usual mere formality of asking or going through the routine of "what's up" or "how are you doing" as a statement rather than a question. As students, we opened up to him, and the mere act of opening up and evaluating our lives helped us better understand ourselves and consequently make changes. Brian Little is one of the teachers who significantly changed my life and the life of many others for the better. In a way, the Spire check-in is about asking, how are you really? Why? Because it looks at your overall reality and evaluates how you're doing within that reality. And through that, it can change your life for the better. I would like to end this quest by sharing one final story about another teacher, a mentor that I had, Dr. Nathaniel Branden. Nathaniel Branden is considered by many to be the father of the self-esteem movement. I wrote my PhD thesis on self-esteem and based it on Branden's work. He has written numerous books, including Honoring the Self and The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. According to Branden, one of the pillars of self-esteem is taking responsibility. He explains then that we truly take responsibility for our life once we assimilate, internalize the fact that no one is coming. In other words, we take responsibility when we truly accept the fact that no Princess Bride or knight in shining armor is coming to save us, that no great manager or leader will see the potential that exists within us, and that no wise man or woman will guide us on the path to happiness. When we truly accept the fact that no one is coming, that's when we're really ready to take responsibility for our lives. Consequently, that's when we're ready to build healthy, solid self-esteem, a strong sense of self. So Nathaniel Branden was giving a 3-day workshop about the pillars of self-esteem. And toward the end of it, on the 3rd day, he was talking about taking responsibility and the fact that no one is coming. As he said that, he noticed the hand of one of the students shooting up all the way at the back of the room. Branden looked at the student and said, "Yes?" "Dr. Branden," said the young man, "I understand what you mean by taking responsibility. I also understand the importance of accepting the fact that no one is coming. But Dr. Branden, I disagree." "How do you mean you disagree?" asked Branden. "Well, Dr. Branden, it's not true that no one is coming." "What do you mean?" asked Nathaniel Branden. "Well, Dr. Branden, it's not true that no one is coming because, Dr. Branden, you came." Nathaniel Branden paused for a few seconds and then said, "Young man, you're right. I came. But I came to tell you that no one is coming. And this is what I'm telling you now, as this quest is coming to an end. Ultimately, you have to take responsibility and accept the fact that no one is coming. Sure, these lessons can help, and a coach can help. Finding an accountability buddy can certainly help. However, it is ultimately your responsibility and your responsibility alone to embark on the various paths to the higher planes of spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being, to a happier life. The final tool, which brings together much of what we have done throughout the quest, is the Spire check-in. This exercise includes 3 steps. Step 1, ascribe. Next to each of the Spire elements, write down a number on a scale of 1 to 10 that captures how you're doing in that particular well-being domain. 1 is terrible, 5 is okay, and 10 is amazing. Step 2, describe. Under each of the elements, describe why you gave yourself that particular score. Step 3, prescribe. In the second space under each of the elements, write about how you intend to increase the score by 1. In other words, how are you going to go from 7 to 8, or from a 3 to a 4? Small incremental changes. Most importantly, of course, is to follow up on your prescriptions so that you can enjoy a healthier and happier life. You are a spiritual being capable of purpose and presence. You're a physical being, a mind and body united, flowing with energy and vitality. You're an intellectual being, curious, deep, capable of learning and growing. You're a relational being, generous and kind, with a capacity to love and to be loved. You're an emotional being, capable of experiencing pain and pleasure, compassion and joy. You are whole.